It's now 27 minutes to 8. This is Morning Express, the way it is, and today we're looking at the life and times of the late Honorable Kenneth Matiba, who died yesterday evening after being in ICU for around 3 weeks, and of course he's been battling ill health for a while. Joining me in studio, we have Sheila Maonga, who's a governance expert. We also have Dr. Duncan Ojwang, who is an advocate, but also a good student of matters governance. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'll start with you, Duncan, because we're with Sheila earlier on, but just what you remember regarding Kenneth Matiba. And although you may not have known him individually, maybe you did on a personal capacity, of course, as you look at governance, he's a name that would appear quite a number of times.
Indeed. So I didn't get an opportunity to know him personally. I think by the time he was in his limelight, I was in primary school. But clearly, while Jaramogi was the doyen of opposition politics, I think the immediate trigger was when Matiba and Rubia drove in a pickup shouting freedom to Kamkunji. And he had resigned from Minister of Transport then, about 1990. And then, you know, rarely were people willing to resign from positions. He did. And of course, I remember him talking and presenting. He's a very eloquent and dramatic speaker. He gestures a lot. So that was his signature. And loved so much. In fact, I think I could rate him the foremost Kikuyu leader to be loved. Well, Kikuyus might have voted for other leaders, including President Uhuru, including Kibaki, but the heart has always been with Matiba. Matiba was loved. And so it's unfortunate, condolences. Spear has fallen, as they are saying. You know, it came in the heel of Miss Mandela also passing. And also not being selfish, because look, after struggling so much, he didn't hog the field. He took a laid-back position, something that is rare in Africa. You know, almost like Mandela. Mandela telling Museveni, I'm resigning, and Museveni is wondering, why are you resigning? People love you so much. And he's saying, that's exactly why I'm resigning, when they still love me.
And they still love me.
Yes, you don't have to indulge and exist. So he took a backseat, and then you see because of that, Kibaki was able to come in and get a space. President Uhuru was able to come in and get a space. He's a businessman. And of course, if you look at the Constitution, and sometimes I have a privilege of teaching the constitutional law, and every chapter, I'm seeing how it is addressing what Matiba went through. For example, right to picket. For example, freedom of assembly with the people. And you can see his sweat, his blood, his pain, giving birth to that strong document that sometimes we take for granted and love to mutilate.
All right, Sheila, let me come to you. And I know you had already given us what you remember in terms of Matiba, but also one of the calls that we had, Wanyiri Kihoro, Honorable Wanyiri Kihoro, a former Nyeri Town MP, mentioned and said that Matiba possibly died disappointed in matters to do with multipartyism. Do you think that he possibly died disappointed? And what is it that possibly we as a country have not, has made us not reach to where some of these fighters of for independence hoped that we would have achieved by now?
I agree with Honorable Kihoro that Matiba died a disappointed man. And with regards to multipartyism, a fight that he fought with so much passion and so much dedication, a fight that led him go to detention. And when he came out of that detention, he was never the same man again. He was plagued with so many health issues, which it was a downhill from there. So we can't say that he was disappointed because the fight has not borne fruits. And I would say this, we've got so many parties now. So we don't have the one party. However, when you take out the names of these parties and just look at what they stand for, you'll find they're very similar. I would expect that if we have different parties, they would stand for different things, or there would be a difference in them. But right now, I see that the ruling party, for example, Jubilee, with the other parties that are there, the opposition parties, they are very, very similar. And sometimes what makes you know that they're very similar, the people, the players in there can dip and dab between them. If truly we had multipartyism, whereby not on paper, the one on paper is there, we are a country that has many parties. But now when we come to the action, that is where we know how the cookie crumbles. And when you look at it, if we change the players, for example, the ones in leadership now, and bring others in it, I don't think we'd have different outcomes in terms of their leadership style and all that. But coming back to Matiba, he fought valiantly. And he fought for what he believed. But if you look at that, just like what Honorable Kihoro was saying, we have gone downhill. But Honorable Kihoro said that it was more to do with economic, that we are in a mess economically. For me, I would say it is not only economically, we are in a mess politically as well. And the problem why we are in it, as you ask in your question, what has made us reach here, is because we silence dissenting voices. We silence people that are truly committed to the welfare of the country. And that's one thing that Matiba did. Matiba, everything that he did was for the benefit of the country. He was a selfless man. He was there ready to fight for the country, ready to give his life, his health, his wealth. This is the caliber of leaders that we're missing now. Right now what we have very selfish leaders who are cowards as well. Matiba was not a coward. Matiba, when as my colleague here said, that he went to the picket line, he fought for the assembly, for the right to assembly, and all that. He stood there, he put his name out there, and he was facing a formidable character, President Moi. One thing which we fail to know here, when you read his book, I've read bits and parts of his book, when you read it, you actually realize that him and President Moi were actually good friends. And then when power got and President Moi became president, power got somewhere and the friendship kind of ended, and Matiba ended up in detention with a lot of wrongs committed against him. So the friendship did end on a very bad note, which also brings in this element that in politics sometimes we lose our integrity, we lose our sense of self, that these two very good friends that at one time were very patriotic about the country, one got into power and somehow everything faded, and another one still continued his fight. This is Matiba. And through this fight, he ended up in detention and then poor health from there, and he faded into the limelight. And just to answer your question, we fail as a country because these leaders that we're supposed to propel up, these leaders that mean the best for the country, we silence them.
We silence them.
And then in the process of silencing them, we lift up inadequate, selfish, egocentric leaders and put them in positions of power. Now, such a leader is not good for the country, if anything.
Dr. Ojwang, and looking at multipartyism and possibly what the fighters or those who fought for freedom earlier envisaged and what we have today, is multipartyism just a tick in the box? In other words, do we just have different parties but more or less the same ideology? There's not really anything different in terms of how they would look at governance, and all they are is what some have termed as special purpose vehicles to get to power. But once they get to power, we really cannot differentiate and tell what is the difference between this party and the other.
That is probably true, yes, to some extent. You see, for Matiba, he has a scar to show, and even his business suffered. He wasn't a friend of the government. We have opposition leaders that dine with the government at night and call us out to rallies during the day. Matiba, if you see how he suffered both physically and even later on his business, Matiba was true to the cause.
It was true to the cause. And allow me to pause you there. I'll come back to you because I want to get somebody who possibly, now that you've talked about him suffering physically, we have Reverend Timothy Njoya, who is another person who we know and remember very well for the fight of democracy. But Reverend, thank you for joining us this morning. But first, let me just have your opening remarks on what you remember about Kenneth Matiba.
Yes, the most thing that I remember about his Matiba is that when I preached about the first thing, again, it's Mulolongo. He was the KANU chairman and the cabinet minister in 1986. So on August 25, 1986, if you read the Nation, he defeated the Mulolongo. But the Mulolongo, when the elections were done in the following year, his queue was the longest, and his opponent was the shortest. but it was declared the winner. But then, after that, I went to recruit him, and you could read that also in those days in the papers. And Matiba agreed. I went to Murang'a to a wedding. I was not going to the wedding. I was not invited, but I went because we agreed to meet in that wedding, and in order that we may talk, because nobody of KANU wanted to be seen with me. He was still chairman of the KANU. So he agreed to join the multi-party debate, which he agreed, and he recruited Rufia. So what I'm interested in Matiba's life most was his conversion experience, that he could shift from a wrong direction to a right direction. I think that shift is what all humanity needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
People can change and do right.
Okay, you are one of those in the forefront of fighting for democracy, just like he was. What are your thoughts on where we are today, and possibly the price that he paid and the price that you paid through the regime that was there, and where we are today?
You see, our fight was not simply for the word democracy; it's for the humanity, for people. You should ask: are people's lives, humanity, freedom? Are those better than they were before? Are people eating better, and are they healthier? And I think Kenya has grown economically, because I know the GDP that time was not even half what it is today. So I don't know whether it's because of multiparty or not, but I think multiparty did distribute politics. Many people who didn't participate in politics before, whether they formed tribal parties or whatever they did, they are awakened. The multi-party awakened people to participate in deciding their destiny. Whether they decide or not, that's not the issue. The issue is that millions of people who are excluded from taking part in determining their future now got forums and opportunities, and they got platforms in which they can talk about their future.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Timothy Njoya, for joining us this morning and basically just giving us an idea of what he remembers of Kenneth Matiba. Let me come back to you, Dr. Ojwang, and I know I cut you short, but maybe you can finish that line of thought. But also to manage time, the idea that multi-party was supposed to bring to the country, and like Reverend says, one of the things that it should have done is improved our lives today. We should be at a better place. Do you think we're at a better place today?
Probably in some extent we are. It's not all doom and gloom. I don't think so. But I'm glad you brought in Njoya. Look at the man of God that took on the tough job, because he didn't look at it as a political thing. He looked at it as humanity, improving humanity. So like you even alluded, was it just a check on our box? But they looked at it holistically, that even that economy thrive in a democratic society. Remember, even in our constitution, how much we did away with roadside declarations.
Correct.
The bottom line, and for me the lesson is that Kenyans have reached here almost by accident, through dissent. It hasn't been a clear path that after independence, we had our path laid out for us, and we sought democracy, and we sought inclusivity, and we sought freedom, and we sought accountability. No, it has been through dissent. And so dissent has been very important in propelling change in Kenya immediately after independence, by Jaramogi, by Matiba, even by Raila. And through the dissent, we have got the changes that now we can say that we almost have a foundation. Yes, we are wobbling. Yes, we might not have seen much. We have not caught up with what we have achieved, but we have a basis. We have a foundation. Remember, this is a time that everybody, even those who are demonstrating, can still quote a chapter or a clause in the Constitution. So to me, it's not all gloom and doom. Yes, it has been derailed, but we are catching up and we have made huge strides.
All right. Well, Sheila, your thoughts on somebody brought out and said Amalema challenge in terms of what he had to say about, because we definitely may have part of those people who are against what Matiba stood for. But away from that, as Kenyans, are we able to glean the progress that some of our forefathers have made and possibly build on that? And are we doing a good job of that? I mean, when we look at our current political situation, even right now, we are talking about the handshake, yet we've not really dealt with some of those issues that are underlying. Matiba definitely was looking at dealing with some issues, historical issues that were there, and we seem to always cover them up.
I would say that as Kenyans, we have undone a lot of the good work that was done by our forefathers. And this undoing has happened with the current crop of leaders that have taken over our forefathers. What has happened? I think what happens, our forefathers were committed to the country. They were taking over the country from the colonial masters or colonialists. They were taking it back, and at the time they were committed. We were all Kenyans fighting against the colonialists. So at that time we do not have things like tribalism or little cohorts of division. We were all one, we were united in purpose, and we managed to take the country away. We managed to take the country off the colonial masters. But I feel that after that, that's when we started losing the plot. That's when we started going into these little tribal cocoons. And I think having a one-party state did not help much at the time. It was good to have a one-party state for a while because we were united at that time and we were having a foundation to build. But I think after a while, when the dissenting voices started coming up, when the Matiba started coming and opposing things that the leadership was putting in place, that is the time that multipartyism should have happened naturally without all these fights and all this dissent. As much as we get a lot, like what Dr. Janga said, as much as we gain a lot through dissent, it makes the journey harder, and sometimes the victory becomes a Pyrrhic victory where we've lost so much as we've gained. So sometimes it's easier just to have these things handed over smoothly. That saves the whole process. Now, in terms of what we can glean from it, I would say that we need to kind of skip the middle bit of leadership that has been there and skip to what the forefathers stood for. So lessons in history are needed, and that is what is missing. Where we are now, we're having leadership that's almost monarchical. We've become almost a monarchy, whereby the people in power are the relatives or descendants of the forefathers. And that just undermines the whole ethos of the country. And the handshake is also benched on that monarchy, dynasty kind of thing. You find that the handshakes are people of children of the forefathers, like you see Raila shook hands with Uhuru. Uhuru's father was the first president. Raila also, his father was also in government. Then we hear there's another handshake between Raila and Moi was the president. Now we hear Gideon Moi wanting to come up. So we have a lot of dynasties coming up. So they are riding on the goodwill of the forefathers. And I think we need to rethink that. We need to go back to the forefathers and not look at them as people, look at what they stood for, because they stood for the country. They stood, for what the country has to move forward as one. As one. I believe right now we are not as one. We are little tribal cocoons, and going on multipartyism, our multi-parties, our parties are now little tribal parties. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Juang, we are running out of time. Your closing comments and possibly your way forward in terms of how multipartyism needs to organically grow in this country.
Yeah, I think we are Matiba's children. When we talk of the Constitution, we are actually borrowing from his life and his struggles. And every time we line up to vote or we quote a clause in our Constitution, we are actually taking from his hard work. I think that where Kenya is today, look, Matiba made a path. He didn't necessarily use it to gain power. Remember, by the time Matiba was struggling, later on, Kibaki was saying it's like cutting a mugumo tree with a razor blade. Mockers and scoffers. But Matiba was not discouraged. And I think that is a big lesson, that as you struggle for the right cause, if you believe in the right cause, do what it takes. And later on, you're seeing that Kibaki went and used his path, almost like a bridge. Once you cross a bridge, people don't look back and say, thank you, bridge, I've crossed this bridge. But as Kibaki was coughing at him when he was struggling, President Kibaki later on noticed, came and became a president, thanks to multi-party. Right now, people who probably oppose the constitution could now be beneficiary. So when we struggle and when we build something, we don't know who is going to benefit. But we do it for ourselves because whether Matiba is gone, his children, his grandchildren, and his spirit, the spirit of Matiba that she's talking about is here. So my parting shot is that I realize that though builders might come and go, the building must go on.
It must go
on.
on.
If you had started building a mansion, in the process, contractor might even die or leave. So you don't stop building because the contractor has gone. This building must go
continue.
on, and it's on us.
The vision must continue.
Yes,
Sheila, your closing comments briefly.
My closing comments is that we need to look at Matiba's life and borrow lessons from it. His detention has taken the focus of what his life was about, but he was so much more than that. Matiba was a very, very successful entrepreneur. He believed in promoting Kenyan products, both within Kenya and outside Kenya. That is one thing that we also have to support. At the moment, we have a lot of imports, some of them very poor quality stuff that we're using Kenya as a dump site, and some of our leaders are involved in this importation because they are getting money from this very illicit business deals that are harming the Kenyan economy and the Kenyan people. Matiba would not have stood for that. He did his business in Kenya, gave employment in Kenya, promoted the Kenya business. So that is one thing we need to look. We need to look at entrepreneurship, but focusing on Kenyan products and promoting the Kenyan market. One lesson we borrow from there. Another lesson we also have to borrow from Matiba's life is that of his philanthropic nature. Matiba raised a lot of money for charitable ventures. He was a fitness enthusiast. Again, another challenge I will give to our leaders out there. Fitness, very important. It's not only important for your physical health, it's also important for your mental health. Matiba was a keen mountaineer. And from it, he raised money out of it. We need leaders that also have a charitable heart, a giving heart. So we can borrow from that. So my closing shot is that we have lost a hero who has a lot of great qualities that we need to borrow from. And we as voters, we need to look for these qualities in the leaders that we are going to vote for. We should use Matiba as an example. And one thing, we have lost a lot of people over the last year. A lot of them, you struggle to find good things to say about them.
Right.
With Matiba, there's so many good things to say about him. So he's a
Until we
hero.
have to cut you short because there's so much to say. Thank you very much, Sheila Maunga, who's a governance expert, Dr. Duncan Ojwang, for joining us this morning on The Way It Is. It's now 5 minutes to 8. Time for us to wind up this segment of the show. But do stay with us right here on KTN News. Today's Monday, and Matter Sports definitely takes center stage. We do have Robin Toskin, who's going to be hosting that segment of the show, and I'm sure he has a lot that's been going on over the weekend. We also do know that the Commonwealth Games came to a close, and Kenya, did we do well? Did we not do well? That's all going to be discussed right here on Sports Chat. So we take that break. When we come back, it's time for Sports Chat. Do stay with us.